Hello, Happy New Year, and welcome to the January 9th, 2024 meeting of the Ann Arbor Historic District Commission. I am Chairperson David Rockland. The time is 7:02 p.m. Let's start with some notes about the meeting format, and then we will begin. First of all, some remote meeting access information. For phone access, call 877-853-5247 and enter meeting ID 965-3669-9762. To request to speak, if listening by phone, press star 9. If you are a participant viewing through the web link, use the raise the hand feature. City staff will use the last 3 digits of the caller's phone number to select telephone callers that have requested to speak. The selected caller will hear an automated announcement from the host. When speaking, please move to a quiet area and mute any television or background sounds. Now about public comment opportunity. Public comments available in person or by telephone during the public comment agenda item and during each public hearing. We will first call on in-person individuals to address the board and then from remote participants. And finally, the sequence for the hearings. For each hearing on the agenda, Planning Services staff will deliver their report, followed by a report from this month's Commissioner Review Committee. Then the applicant or their representative will have up to 5 minutes to make their presentation. Next, commissioners may ask questions of the applicant, and then that hearing will be open for public comment. Following public comment, a commissioner will make a motion and discuss the application. Finally, the approval from a majority of commissioners present will be required for a certificate of appropriateness to be granted. Now we'll move on to item B on the agenda, that's roll call. Ms. Thatcher, will you please call the roll?
Yes, Commissioner Rockland.
Here.
Commissioner Calderon. Commissioner Smith.
Here.
Commissioner Fortner. Commissioner Ross. Commissioner Kaplan. Commissioner Kaplan is expected but running late. You do not have a quorum, though, until Steve arrives.
Very good. Thank you. I'll now move on to item C, that's approval of the agenda. I'm wondering if there's any additions, deletions, or changes to the agenda. Okay, seeing none, the agenda is approved as presented. Now we'll move on to public comment, that's letter D. This is an opportunity for members of the public to speak to the Historic District Commission for up to 3 minutes about an issue that is not listed as a public hearing on this agenda. So, do we have anyone? I will read the rest of this, but if we don't have anyone, I will skip ahead. Okay?
Well, we do have someone in the Zoom.
Let me just read the information then. So, to speak, if listening by phone, press star 9. Or if viewing through the web link, use the raise hand feature. We will first call on in-person individuals to address the board, and then remote participants. We do not have any in-person individuals, so do we have anyone remotely? No, very good. Okay, in that case, we will move on to E, unfinished business. And we do not have any unfinished business this month, so then we'll move on to F, hearings. The first hearing, F1, is 415 West William Street. And I will ask for the staff report, please.
Sorry. Yeah, so we were on site and...
Hold on. We got to do the staff report first.
Oh, sorry.
Yep.
Okay. So we are at 415 West William. This house first appears in the 1917 city directory as the home of Frank E. Case and music teacher John G. Kurtz. It is 2 stories with a steeply pitched pyramidal roof, 3 dormers facing the fronts and sides. Features a full-width concrete front porch with half columns and a single-car shed-roofed garage. The site is located on the south side of West William between 2nd and 3rd Streets, and the applicant seeks HDC approval to install a radon mitigation system on the east side of the building next to the front porch and near the street. So this is typically mechanical work and things like that. Radon systems are staff approvals. This one is coming before the HDC though because the applicant is proposing a highly visible location. This is the front of the house and the porch, and the applicant is proposing that the system go right here down this corner. Just a couple zoomed in photos. Again, the proposed location is right here. This is kind of up, looking up, and then this is looking straight ahead with the ground level. Some other views of the house. This is, again, the front, and then the other side that has a staircase. This is in between the house and the garage and the patio area. You'll be able to see a little bit better on the plan when we get there. Here's some other mechanical systems that are currently existing on the house. This is in that in-between kind of pathway area, walk-through. Other mechanical systems in the walk-through, looking down and looking up. And this is an earlier photograph of the house before it was painted the current colors. You can see this is still the corner that we're looking at. So these are the applicant materials, and based on samples taken by the applicant, a long-term mitigation system is necessary on site. You can see here through the plan, this is the location again at the front of the house. This is that walk-through kind of area between, I guess, between the owner's residence and the house. And then there's patio above here. We're looking at the basement. Here's some details of the proposed radon mitigation system. Some more details of how it'll look. Then applicant showing where the system will be located. You can see a little blurry. Location is here. Here's the porch, and then William Street would be right up top. Here's some of the crawl spaces at the interior, which another plan drawing, this time reversed. So the front is down here and William Street is down here, and this is the location. And then you can see a few photos where the crawl space is too tight for system installation. Some more interior photos. So before we get to the standards, this is, as I've mentioned, a highly visible location, visible from the street along the east facade that will be above the roof and directly adjacent the historic front porch. And this placement does not meet the Historic Design District guidelines. Staff recommends placing the mitigation system in a different location that is less visible from the street, where mechanical systems are approvable and do meet the design guidelines. But if the HDC does find that this is the only possible location for the radon mitigation system, staff recommends that the unit be painted to blend in with the exterior. So I'll just read the standards. 2, the historic character of a property will be retained and preserved. The removal of historic materials or alteration of features and spaces that characterize a property will be avoided. 9, new additions, exterior alterations, or related new construction shall not destroy historic materials that characterize the property. The new work shall be differentiated from the old and shall be compatible with the massing, size, scale, and architectural features to protect the historic integrity of the property and its environment. And then 10, new additions and adjacent or related new construction will be undertaken in such a manner that if removed in the future, the essential form and integrity of the historic property and its environment would be unimpaired. From the Secretary of the Interior guidelines, it's recommended that mechanical systems are installed so that they cause the least alteration possible to the building's floor plan, the exterior elevations, and damage to the historic building material, the least damage. For site, it is not recommended to introduce new construction on the site which is visually incompatible in terms of size, scale, design, materials, color, or texture. From the Ann Arbor Historic District Design Guidelines for mechanical equipment, it is appropriate to install mechanical equipment and wiring in locations on the roof, rear elevations, or in alleys so that they're not visible from the street. And it's also appropriate to paint mechanical equipment to blend in with the house or a historic building. And then lastly, for mechanical equipment, it's appropriate to install vertical runs of ducts, pipes, and cables in the interior of the building in closets, service rooms, or wall cavities so that they're not visible from the exterior. So this is a mechanical system in a highly visible location. Doesn't meet the design guidelines as proposed, but if this is the only possible location for this mitigation system, which is necessary on site, then there are ways like painting it to make it less visible. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mariana. All right, so next, we'll have the review committee report. Myself and Commissioners Kaplan were on the committee. Do you want to give your report?
Sure. I think one of the things that you can see from the photographs is that the layout is a little chaotic, and there's a lot of extra pads, crawl spaces, structures that have been added on to this thing. We asked, I think numerous times, what other options might exist here, and the consultant who was with us for the tour repeatedly said that they had tried to explore other options and nothing else was possible. But it's hard to know how or why that is. I mean, it does seem like it would be a real challenge to go anywhere here. But I think, it was hard. We weren't able to get inside either, so it was hard to see with our own eyes what other options might exist. I asked a question about the heating system, maybe still using the chimney, if the chimney might be used alternatively. I still don't know if I don't know what the heat system is for the building. But it seems like there should at least be a couple of other alternatives with a little harder searching.
Thank you. I guess I'll add that, that was the main discussion, obviously, since we heard the staff report about this not meeting the standards, was, well, where can we put this? And if we just go, we went around the building. Obviously, the front is worse. So you take the whole front facade out. On the facade that we're looking at, we were told by the consultant that it cannot be put through a crawl space because the crawl spaces are too small for a worker to do the work that's necessary to attach the pipes. Like Commissioner Kaplan said, we couldn't go in to assess that, but that's what the contractor said. So the whole back third of the house, not the whole back third, a lot of the back third of the house is also crawl space. So that took out a lot in our discussion. And then on the west facade, which we're not looking at now, but I don't know if you want to move around there. So the discussion was basically about the stairway that runs the entire length, as you can see. And so obviously this would disrupt the stairway. Technically, so there's no crawl space on that side for 2/3 of it, like I think up to that glass block window. So yes, the crawl space isn't the issue there, but obviously this is going to cause more expense for the owner and who knows how much if you have to rebuild the entire stair because now the stair needs to come up to code or something. It's obviously a can of worms for the owner, and the preference is to not do it along the stair. And then we went into the narrow opening that was shown that's between the owner residence and the south facade right there. And that's all crawl space except where you see the electrical meter. It's very narrow there, and this box it's bigger than a normal radon fan. And so anyway, I don't know if this is not obviously preferred either, I think, by the owner, because of just the fact that this is very narrow already, and now we're going to make it even more narrow. There's another issue here that he said that they have to drill the hole like through the sill plate from the outside. So in order to drill the hole through the sill plate here, you'd have to tear up the deck, see what's down there, find access to the sill plate and drill, then rebuild. So again, it's another reason why that's not preferred. So, you have sort of like certain areas where it sounds like it's technically not possible, and then certain areas where it just would be more onerous for the owner. So that was where we just came back to, well, it just seems like this is the only spot they could put it, which it was unfortunate, but that was the discussion on site. So let's move on. And hopefully the applicant's here, because we probably have some questions for them. So I don't see them here. Are they
Yep,
remotely?
he's here.
Great.
Give him 1 minute to rejoin as a panelist.
Very good. So yeah, we will,
There we go.
we'll hear from the applicant. So,
Just to confirm, Brian, you are here for this application, correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
great. Hi, Brian. Please, it sounds like you've unmuted. If you could turn on your video too. Oh, you've turned on your video. Great. So you have 5 minutes to speak now to address what you've heard so far. So I'm just wondering, first of all, do you have anything to add to the staff report or the review committee report?
I think you covered a lot of it. I think a couple things that I would like to add. I guess first of all, you may know this already, but it wasn't explicitly mentioned. We want the piping to run up the exterior of the house. That's pretty standard for mitigation systems, so that if there is a leak on the downstream side of the fan, that it is going out into the indoor air and not, pumping vapors into the house. I think, as you mentioned, this facade that we're seeing here, in addition to potential difficulties with the stairway, I think that's perhaps even more visible than the east side of the house. I think, as you mentioned, there are issues with running the piping out the back side of the house or the south side because of the crawl spaces and the deck. And I think the other point that I'd like to make, if you don't mind changing to the photo of our preferred or our proposed location, there is a short picket fence that is there now that I think would partially obscure the fan. And we are willing to paint the equipment exterior of the house to match the exterior.
Brian, I'm sorry. Can you please state your name and address for the record? I meant to ask you that earlier, but forgot.
Sure. My name is Brian Van Dynen. I'm with Geosyntec Consultants, which has an address of 2100 Commonwealth Boulevard, Suite 100, Ann Arbor, Michigan, 48105.
Thanks for that. Do you have any further comments?
No, but I'd be happy to answer any questions that haven't been addressed.
I appreciate that. Any questions for Brian? Yeah.
Yeah, Brian, thanks. I got a quick question. When we were on site, we were told that this is a mitigation system not for radon, but for some other type of gas, and that the fan would be different in shape than in what I'm normally imagining a radon fan would be. Is that correct?
Yes.
And when I was trying to get a picture in my head of what that unit looks like, I'm picturing something the size of about 2 shoeboxes side by side in height, depth, and width. Is that about right?
Yeah, that sounds about right.
Okay. And that, like a radon fan, that ideally is just outside of the interior space, and it pushes up the height of the pipe. It's not pulling from the top of the pipe or pushing at the very bottom. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay.
I have a couple of questions. Hey, Brian, thanks for making yourself available and answering some of our questions. So is this mitigation system similar to some of the ones that were installed over at the houses on Fifth Street?
I guess I'm not aware of a house
There
with an
are
address on Fifth Street.
there are one or two over on is it Fifth? Fourth Street. Sorry, Fourth Street. That adjoin the Argus, that are adjacent to the Argus building property that had some mitigation work done. I think it's probably now 4 or 5 years ago. I don't know what the VOCs were that they were worried about, whether it was radon, whether it was something else. But there are a couple of houses over there that have exterior mitigation, this piping, and I'm just wondering if it was similar to that. But if you don't know the answer to that, that's okay. The other,
There are, I'm sorry, there wasn't anything on Fifth Street, but there are a few properties farther west where mitigation systems were put in to address the same problem. I think the system fan is a little bit different here. So it's bigger than a standard radon system, but smaller than another fan that was installed on one of those other properties.
okay. My other question is, this is all obviously connected to the Argus building contamination and fact that there's an identified responsible party to this. This all comes out of that, right? This isn't a homeowner expense?
Correct.
Okay, thanks.
I'm wondering if, you mentioned the picket fence that's there, and that was installed for screening purposes, actually, for another proposal that was approved. And have you had any thought, or what do you think about extending the fence over, or if you did extend the fence over, would it cover the fan? And what do you think about extending the fence over as part of the project?
Yeah, I think it would cover the fan, as shown there, and I wouldn't have an issue if, I think it would be much more straightforward to extend that fence than it would be to try to find an alternative location on this building.
Yeah. And are you also amenable to painting it as has been requested by staff?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. What is the expectation, let's say, like from the sidewalk? Will I hear the unit during like a normal operation?
No, I don't think you would. I mean, it would certainly be under the levels in the city's noise ordinance. We've chosen a fan to be relatively quiet, and there is a muffler at the top of the stack to limit any noise from, the gas moving through the piping.
Yeah, I wouldn't have even thought to guess or to ask that question, but I saw the muffler, and that's when I thought, well, how loud is this thing? But it sounds like it's not going to be loud enough to hear from the sidewalk, so that's a relief. Okay, so do you have more questions? One more. Great, yeah.
Brian, I'm sorry, I forgot to ask in the first round. The fan in the diagram is wall-mounted, and therefore, I think, runs taller than it does wide. Is that correct? Is the fan dependent on being oriented that way, or does it work in any direction?
Yes, it would be oriented that way. So the inlet is on the bottom and the outlet is on the top.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, thanks for answering all those questions, Brian. We're going to move on with the hearing. We might have follow-up for you in a second, but just for now, thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
Great. Okay, so we'll now open the public hearing for this item. It's 415 West William Street. This is an opportunity for persons to speak for up to 3 minutes about this application. So we don't have anyone approaching the podium here. Do we have anyone
No, we do not.
in the Zoom room? Okay, very good. So now we will close the public hearing. And I will ask, is there a commissioner who would like to make a motion? Okay. Commissioner Smith's going to do it.
I move the commission issue a certificate of appropriateness for the application 415 West William Street, a contributing structure, the Old West Side Historic District, to install a radon mitigation system near the northeast corner of the building on the condition that the entire unit is painted to match the exterior color. As conditioned, the work is compatible in exterior design arrangement materials in relationship to the building, the surrounding area, and meets the City of Ann Arbor Historic District guidelines for mechanical equipment and the Secretary of Interior standards for rehabilitation, guidelines for rehabilitating historic buildings, in particular standards 2, 9, and 10, and the guidelines for mechanical systems.
Great, do we have a second on that? Second. Okay, that was moved by Commissioner Smith and seconded by Commissioner Calderon. Is there any discussion on the motion?
Do we want to add into the motion and, extending that picket fence? I think we
That would probably
do.
make sense. Yeah.
Yep. I would consider that a friendly amendment.
I'm wondering about that, yeah.
The only reluctance that I have about requiring that fence is there's a water spigot right there next to where this fan is going to go. And if I were the homeowner, I would
Yeah.
not want to bring my water all the way around a fence
Right.
in order to get back to the front of a house. So I don't know what to do with that.
Yeah. So
Maybe it's optional, maybe it's recommended.
this is
Maybe
something
it's
that
at
the
homeowner's
homeowner,
discretion.
yeah. Yeah, the homeowner's not here now, so we cannot ask that question. If we put it in the motion and the homeowner doesn't want that, then they're stuck with the motion.
Yeah.
Okay,
I'd say just leave it be then.
yeah. Yeah, our preference would be to have that fence, and I guess that can be between the contractor and the homeowner. And I don't know how to leave that, actually.
Yeah.
I would
don't
guess
think-
that the fence isn't going to get built then.
Right.
Yeah,
Probably.
yeah.
If,
It's going to get painted. I mean, I guess, yeah, part of this discussion is just like this location doesn't match the standards, but I think we've all come to an agreement that maybe this is the right spot. Like, first of all, this is a required thing that this structure needs, and this is basically the one spot that's feasible. I mean, if we don't agree with that, then we shouldn't approve the motion. So do you have a comment on that?
I do.
Yeah.
I think I'm a little unclear as to whether we're choosing this because everything else is impossible or everything else is a lot less convenient. And given what staff is recommending, I think, I don't know, I'd like to push harder on seeing what else could happen. I think that when I'm just looking at the narrow wooden deck between the structures, I imagine that to be built much like most above-ground decks are, where you have a couple of stringers and those boards are floating atop grade, and there's a certain amount of distance between them and the ground. And so when I was asking about the orientation of the fan assembly and how it has to fit, I'm wondering, I mean, pulling up 3 or 4 boards in a 3-foot wide boardwalk is not very complicated. It's not very inconvenient. If we were putting this on the front of the house just to avoid unscrewing 4 boards, I don't think we're doing our job.
You'd also have to take up the structure, because like a human has to go down there, so if it's like joists at 12 on center, so,
Right.
you know, like you can't get a
Right, and-
drill in there.
Right.
So it's more than just the 3 boards,
Right,
but
you got to get a core drill, an angle, but I'm not sure. I haven't heard anything that says this is absolutely impossible. It can't be done. I think what we've heard is this is kind of hard. This is kind of hard. This is kind of hard. This is easy. Let's do this. And-
Modular rate on many years, but would there be maintenance that would have to be done on these? Would that to like take out the boards multiple times to do something to them and put it back on again? If it was going underneath the porch?
I mean, I think, we have an expert here, so,
Right.
but I'll just, if we get back to Brian, I'll have him weigh in on this, but the fan may require maintenance, but I think that the thing that, you know, the pipe that goes through your sill plate that's probably pretty good for 30 years or something, you know, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, I think I agree with you, but, yeah, it's hard to say. It's hard, so like, if we say no, you think they're gonna come back with another solution, actually, like?
Yes.
yeah. So, that is probably true. So that other solution would involve, yeah, like rebuilding that entire stair on the west side, probably. This is like a permanent, you know, it's not like
Sure.
just someone putting a pipe up on the, right? It's like this is a thing that the city is gonna wanna see,
You have
things get updated.
You do have vertical structure for that stair that's away from the house, and you could, in theory, pipe it along that vertical member. It would, you know, it would read like just a wider support for the stair.
Yeah. Yeah, also, I do agree with Brian that that whole side is quite visible. You could put it further back maybe, but there are windows, and I don't know if that side's necessarily better than where they're putting it because of just the visibility.
It's the last unadulterated corner of the house.
Yeah.
Everything else, I mean, that stairway isn't original to the building. Nothing else is apparently original to the building. There's one little place that kind of looks like the way the house was built. We're gonna stick a pipe on it.
Well, it's where the gas meter is. It's-
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
true. Yeah,
It's
at
other
grade,
stuff
there's
there.
stuff, no question.
All right.
That's
I
right.
mean, I think just aesthetically, if you paint it the same color as the house, it doesn't stand out against the house. Where it'll stand out is above the roof line, where it has to vent. And there's nothing you can do about that. It's going to be visible from either side there. You know, I think also the context of, you know, this is a health and safety issue for the people inside the house, right? It's volatile VOCs, you know, that trichloroethylene or dichloroethylene and TCEs, you know, bad stuff from decades of making cameras. And, you know, they didn't sign up for this. The homeowner does, you know, the only reason the homeowner's involved in this is because they found that they have unsafe air quality. And, you know, there's no great solution for them. And so I sort of look at it as they didn't sign up for this. They didn't know this when they bought the house. They didn't, you know, start their Airbnb or their B&B knowing this. So, like, I don't know. I just feel like maybe let's minimize the disruption to them that this is going to cause them.
I think those are both really good points. And so I guess what we haven't heard from Brian is just, I want to hear exactly why we can't put it, because I think it's an aesthetic thing, like, do you put it in the front corner on the left side of the house, or do you put it on the right side of the house? They're both very visible. That back area would be completely invisible from the street. There's no crawl space there. So, yes, inconvenient that there's a deck, but it's like, okay, couple boards up, and maybe you do have to replace one joist or something, but if we don't have to see it at all, I'm going to ask Brian to explain exactly why we can't do it there. Is there another comment first? Yes.
Yeah, I'm sorry,
That's okay.
Staff doesn't usually butt into the middle.
We appreciate it when you do,
By all
with
means.
very good comments.
When you look at
Always.
this photo that's here.
Yeah.
That space between the house and the owner's house, which is the little building behind.
Yes,
It's about 3 feet.
okay,
And if you put a radon, no, it's not radon, I know, but if you put a fan.
It is a radon fan.
Sticking out, what did we say? 12 to 18 inches?
I think that's the width.
Okay.
I think
So
the
the-
height, I
the-
think it's
the
8 inches
depth,
deep.
so
Yeah.
maybe find out the depth from Brian.
Yeah.
My concern is that the entrance to the owner's house is around the corner there.
yeah.
On the back.
Yeah,
And she, I'm not going to be specific, but she has identified health concerns.
yeah, right.
And narrowing it even more,
Right.
to get around something is a concern of mine.
What I'm
I agree.
What I'm imagining is, I don't know what's beneath this wooden deck, but
Yeah.
if it was soil, or even if it was concrete, the box could be below this walkway. You could put it in a window well hid.
I think the sill plate is directly, look where the door is, right? The sill plate's like right there.
Right, okay.
So it needs to come up and out and turn, right? I think that's a great point from staff.
Thank you for indulging me.
Oh, no, please. We always appreciate it. And so let's just, with that in mind, let's hear from Brian. We just want to know, we like this back location except for the narrowness of it. We like that we can't see it. There's no crawl space there. Yes, it might add some added expense with the boards and maybe some structure, but that would maybe be equal to extending the fence anyway. So let us know, what technically, what's the issue back here?
Yeah, I think Jill's point about the narrowness of the walkway is a good one. Can you, do you mind flipping to the slide that shows the design drawing with the plan view of the house? Yeah, okay. Yeah, I think the width is the main concern. I thought maybe that that back crawl space extended across the entire back length of the house, but that doesn't look to be the case.
Let's look at the other floor plan also that's drawn to scale, because if there's a gap, oh, yeah, okay. I guess it's kind of good that there's a gap there. Like, you're walking down that narrow path and then you can take a left turn and there's an opening. But that's also, I believe, where the door is opening, right? So like, that would maybe be a good spot for it because it's not as narrow there, but you can't open a storm door into this thing. We don't have a first floor plan, I believe. We just have the basement plan here, but we have to imagine above, there's an exit door facing that narrow path.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much for that added information, Brian. While we have you there, in terms of maintenance, what's the expected maintenance on this item?
The fan would need to be replaced every few years as it reaches the end of its life. I think that is the extent of the maintenance that is expected for the system.
Thank you. Okay, we will continue our discussion. Okay, well, yeah, I want that back part to be a spot to put this, but I'm not seeing it because of just of the narrowness of that. So, oh, my microphone's off. Yeah, so what are you thinking, Steve? Still have a hunch that we can put it somewhere else?
I mean, that's a great question maybe to ask Brian. If we say no, is there a plan B out there? What would they do? Is there something else they can do? We don't know that. I don't know, does that box have to be at ground
Your
level?
microphone's off.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Could in theory that box be raised up higher to be just under the eaves so that it isn't a trip hazard? It's still narrow, but you're not consuming the 3 feet of width of that corridor as much if it's up here. So, I mean, there's,
Why don't you ask Brian?
Yeah. That's a good question.
sorry, Brian, you didn't hear me earlier because my mic had been turned off, but one of the things I would say is like, if the corner that you're requesting to install this system in, if that were just not possible, is there a plan B? Is there something strategically you guys have talked about where you're like, okay, well, if we can't get this, there's this other way we might do, but wow, would it be, it would be, a bear to do, but it's possible? Could we hear what that looks like if there is one?
Yeah, I think the only other possibility that we considered is running it out of the west side of the house by that stairway, and finding a way to snake the piping around that stairway. But I think, like we already mentioned, I think that side of the house is even more. The system would be even more visible. You can maybe hide the fan under the stairway, but you would still be able to see it and the piping. We didn't really entertain running it up the south wall because of the deck and crawl spaces and the narrow walkway.
Okay. Have you heard enough?
Yeah.
Okay. Any other comments? All right, this is obviously a tricky one, and we're just, trying to do the best here for this historic structure. But let's, is everyone ready to vote? Okay. All right, so we will vote on the motion. I guess before we vote, just one thing that crossed my mind was, for extending the fence, I just feel like, yes, the hose thing would be annoying, but if you just don't extend the fence all the way and you can still get to the nozzle, I just feel like, can't you still operate the...
There's some creative plumbing. You could run a splitter and run something.
I feel like if that would help.
Commissioners, it's also within your purview to require landscaping to block the views of things. So if landscaping there, if a shrub would do better than a fence, it's a possibility.
I think, yeah. Well, now we're going to get into some landscape design, but I think that, I think that extending the fence would do a lot. You don't need to extend it all the way, but then if you're not extending it all the way, you're not really blocking the thing. Okay, so I thought that went through, and never mind. Okay, let's go to a vote here. We've really had a lot of discussion, and I think we're ready. Okay, all those in favor of the motion say yes.
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 All those opposed say no. Okay, the motion carries. Your application has been approved. Please note that you must receive all required permits from the city before beginning your project, and that the work in the permits must match what was approved by the Historic District Commission. Thank you, Brian.
Thank you.
Okay, that was our one and only hearing for this evening. We will now move on to G, new business, business. And that is G1, design guidelines, assignment and review. Does staff want to take it over from here?
Sure.
Thank you.
So Mariana's gone through the next chapter of the design guidelines and made some excellent observations. I understand that our fix for your technical difficulties in marking up this document, everyone being on the same one, were a fail. So we'll go back to the drawing board and ask IT for another solution. In the meantime, we're just going to go through this page by page, and I want you to just stop us as we go through and say, got a comment here. And it is a long chapter, and I don't want to go too quickly through it, but I also want to, keep moving. So a lot of the comments that you can see on here are things, I think like this looks like a hot link. Is that a link?
Yeah, those are links.
Okay. A lot of the things that Mariana has added in here are just for clarification. Comments like these two can probably be combined. Yes, they can totally be combined, and we'll do that when we get through them. Therefore, I'm not going to read all of these to you. But one thing that she pointed out is that it's not appropriate to design an addition that is taller or wider than the historic property, which is great. We need that in there. And I went on to clarify it on future pages. Also, designing an addition that is highly visible from the right-of-way. That kind of addresses the corner lot issue. Sometimes we get difficult additions on corner lots, and if it just strengthens the argument that you got to treat those with special care, I think.
And I think in general, Commissioner, something that we're thinking about and something that we want you to think about is that sometimes saying something along the lines of it's not appropriate to design a new addition, that the size and scale in relation to the historic property are out of proportion. That can mean a lot of things. And so just based on experience, where we can be more specific about saying, the corner should be inset X amount of inches rather than it should just be in proportion. Where we can be more specific, I think is helpful.
Yeah, so I had a comment on this page. I thought of, so in the not appropriate column, I would recommend putting this second to last, so right there. And my thought was to add a not appropriate that says something about mimicking exactly mimicking the original or the historic structure. And I said designing an addition with details that match in both size and material the character defining details of the historic property.
Say that again, please. Designing an addition.
So I said designing an addition with details that match in both size and material the character defining details of the historic property. Meaning that you should not be exactly mimicking in your addition the details that are there in the historic. And I said size and material because I do believe we allow if it's the same size, it should be a different material. Like sometimes the window trim is exactly the same, but it's cementitious instead of wood, and that seems allowable. Okay. Do you think is that something, what do you think about that?
No, I think that's great.
Okay.
Something we bring up all the time.
Yeah.
I'm wondering if there's an easier way to say it.
It's like so that someone doesn't misinterpret the new addition as historic.
Yes,
Yeah.
yeah, that it's clearly a later period piece and differentiate using different materials. I feel like this exercise for staff is about economy of words.
It is. Yeah, and it's sometimes difficult to write in this format that's just appropriate or not appropriate, because I want to just go on and explain.
Oh, yeah.
But you can't.
Yeah,
You just
yeah.
gotta-
There's a lot-
It's got to be one sentence.
There's a lot of sort of definitions in there that they're just kind of left as is, like
Yeah.
character defining feature, for example. If you don't know what that is, then that bullet doesn't mean much to you, but you
Yeah.
can't be putting all that in there.
All right, we'll work on cleaning up, all comments. All right, now we're looking at additions to historic residential structures.
Yeah, I just right off the bat, I was confused, I guess because I was reading this carefully, and it said that this chapter is design guidelines for all historic properties, and then chapter 4 is design guidelines for historic residential properties, and chapter 5 is commercial properties. But then right within this chapter, we go into something that says additions to historic residential structures. And my question is, why is this here and not in chapter 4?
I think there's a few of those where the section seems to be in the wrong place.
Uh-huh.
So I think that's just an overall, when we go through and format and everything,
Yeah.
we'll make sure that the organization.
Like this whole
and
chunk can go in
makes
the
sense,
next
yeah.
chapter if everything else in that chapter is about residential structures.
Yeah.
All right, I made a note, thank you.
Okay.
New language here is that new walls that are placed in a different plane should be inset a minimum of 12 to 18 inches from the historic walls to maintain original corners. I've been telling people that for a while. That means that they often come back with 10 inches, because I told them 12 to 18. But before we were consistently saying that, people were coming in with 3-inch insets, and that visually just doesn't break anything up. It's just the width of a corner trim board. And there's also new language here that has to be much simplified about the roof ridge, and the addition being lower than the roof ridge of the house.
The roof ridge, okay.
But I just threw that in here so that I wouldn't forget it. You know how we say, if you're attaching your addition to the rear wall of a gable, gable fronter,
Mm-hmm.
attach the addition below the wide board trim in the eave, or if there isn't any, just drop it down.
Mm-hmm.
And people always say, how far?
Mm.
And I mean, a lot of it depends on the house and the structure of it,
Mm-hmm.
but I did say if no trim is present, the attachment should be at least 12 inches below the historic roof.
Yeah.
That's not always going to be possible, because sometimes people are going to have headroom limits that they're,
Yeah.
bumping up against,
Yeah.
unintended, on the interior of the attic. But I think it's a guideline, so I think that's a good starting point for discussions.
I would be fine if you just said that the new walls should be inset a minimum of 12 inches. I think 12 to 8, it's a little weird. There's like a minimum, but the minimum is a range. I don't really get that. I would just say minimum of 12, because 12 is
Yeah.
less than 18 and 17 and 16. Like, I
I was
don't,
the one who added a minimum
I
of-
like the minimum. No, that is, otherwise it's
But-
confusing where it seems like the maximum's 18. and
Yeah,
the minimum
I
is
would
12.
I would just say minimum and leave it at that. And the same-
Minimum of 12.
Yeah,
Okay.
Yeah, instead of 12 to 18.
right.
That would be my vote too. Now, you can say in your.
18 preferred.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, if we want 18, then let's say minimum of 18. But having a range, like a minimum with a range is
Yeah.
confusing.
Got it. And then finally, under not appropriate, there's one about extending historic roof surfaces on the same plane. And you can tell me if that makes sense or not. You know, extruding a roof is a problem.
Instead of placing, yeah.
Yeah, that relates back to what we were just talking about. That should be 12 inches minimum below.
Exactly. It's the
Yeah.
corollary to the one you added, yeah.
Yeah, we have run into a few weird design scenarios where it's not really something that you need to drop it below, but we still don't want, you know, the bowling alley effect, and, yeah. But again, guidelines.
Right.
All right.
Okay, those are good.
Additions to historic commercial structures.
Yeah. And this was what I thought should be in chapter 5.
Yeah, okay.
Having not looked at chapter 4 or 5 yet, just at the beginning of this chapter, it says what they are.
Okay. If you guys recall,
Yep.
some of you, not all of you, for 215, 217 South Main Street, which is finally almost going to Planning Commission for the site plan approval,
Wow.
there was a lot of talk about this step back from the street wall and how deep it should be. And I think on that building, we decided that 16 feet was appropriate because that was the width of one of the bays of the building. But do any of you recall that more clearly?
I do.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Is that,
it
is
was
that,
19 feet that it was set back.
That's what I remember also.
and was
But that was the
but
width of
why?
the bay.
Was
Which
that the
one
width of
was
the bay?
two?
That's like right next to Volta Midnight on Main Street.
Oh, right.
Yeah, Urban Jewelers. Okay, so that was the width of a bay, and I got that out of a Secretary of Interior
Yeah.
document, guidance document. Not all buildings have bays.
Yeah,
So,
I feel like having greater flexibility here is better.
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
if this is one of our guidelines, there'll be some pushback from some downtown building owners that's not insignificant.
yeah. And it would be hard to be consistent between buildings because they're
Right.
all a little different in width, and so they all.
Yeah, right. So
Yeah.
like the Peaceable Kingdom building would only have to set their thing back 10 feet.
Yeah.
But, you know,
Yeah.
the corner would have to do it 20 feet.
Yeah, is it too simple to just talk about what its visibility is from street level?
Yeah, I
It's-
think that's in there. Yeah, that's a
Designing
good
additional
point.
Yeah.
stories that are set back from the front and sidewall planes and are as inconspicuous as possible when
Yeah.
viewed from the street.
I think that's what you're talking about, right, Ben?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we have that. Do we need the second part?
I don't think so. I think that takes care of it.
Yeah.
But I would recommend removing the words "as possible," because like in a guideline, we don't want to say "as possible." Like that is opening a
nebulous.
door.
Are inconspicuous.
Yeah, that are inconspicuous when because that's like a strong statement, and then
Yes.
they know where we're like because
Yes.
as possible is an out.
And then it's restated in the next bullet. But belt and suspenders.
Yeah, and then the as possible thing is also in that diagram that says appropriate right there. I
Down here?
yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, just remove that as possible. Oh, and I guess you remove the as too.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks, Joe.
Okay, good. So since this is sure to come up again, can you all think of any design guidelines that would be helpful in discussions about putting additions on the roofs of 3-story downtown commercial buildings or 2-story downtown commercial buildings? Because I know we really struggled with that, and part of it was, it wasn't just us that were struggling with it, you know, they were struggling with the design as well. But is there anything that we could tell them that would help, you know, that's what I was getting at with that.
I mean, I can't think of being specific in a way that doesn't provide a little bit of flexibility for the designers to, try and achieve more. I think
Yeah.
one of the things that I've heard repeatedly, in my 10-plus years of service here is that, it's so cost prohibitive to do work on these buildings downtown that, we limit your height, we limit your density, we limit all of these things. And so they just can't make the money work. And I think we need to try and be as flexible and understanding of that as possible. And in some cases, it probably is appropriate to build right out to the street wall. Like, it depends on what's around it and, what that context is. And in others, it's not, and it's not, some of that's just location and context of the site. And I think that future commissions need to have the flexibility to allow those things.
I would echo that. I'd also say that in a lot of ways, when we're dealing in a residential setting, there's usually a yard, there's a larger parcel. So the need for more space or the desire to adapt an old structure to a new way of living, we use those yards, right? Keep the building smaller, tuck it behind so it's not visible from the street. We can do all of those things in a residential setting because of the yard. And in the context of these buildings, you can't go back because they're to the property line. You can't go forward. You can't go sideways because these buildings sit on their lot lines. The only place for these things to expand is up. And I would argue there's more pressure on these buildings to expand to accommodate modern uses than there is on residential property. So I feel like we have to find, as Chip said, we have to find some way to make this work for users because our downtown is historic and we want to see it grow with a growing city. And I don't know if I have an answer to it, but I'd see that as the problem.
Yeah, and that's exactly why I'm hoping to give better guidance up front,
Yeah.
but we may not be able to do that. It just might not work that way. So,
That's the joy of having a historic downtown, is all the buildings are different and the context is different
yeah,
from,
yeah.
and just means our job is harder.
I would say that these are the most complicated buildings to add on to, and it's a historic district, so hire a expert in historic architecture, and that's what happened on the corner of Liberty and Main. Those owners hired an expert, and they got approved.
Yeah.
Right? So I just think that at some point, I don't want to blame the standards for, these issues, because it's like, if the standard says you should be inconspicuous, it's like, it's hard to, I think that, it is very difficult, but anyway, yeah.
All right. Next up, historic building elements, speaking broadly. There's some text here about windows and materials, and then it launches into the long information set for windows, types of windows.
Yeah, there's a lot of info here.
They may also have decorative caming. What's caming?
I had to Google that.
It's like the lead that makes the designs on the windows.
Okay. Okay.
I learned a new word. Is it camming or caming? or-
Caming, yeah.
Caming, yeah.
Okay. So we may have to translate that for people.
Yeah, I didn't know what the translation was, but
Yeah.
it's like the decorative work on windows, like the Frank Lloyd Wright windows
Yeah.
and things like that.
Is it lead on the glass or is it leaded glass, like stained glass?
No, it's the lead that will hold the individual panes of glass
Yeah.
together in the
Okay.
design.
Okay. Okay. So probably most frequently the squares around the picture window in the front or
Yeah.
on the side.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Window parts. When I was cleaning out a cabinet the other day, I found some interesting information on windows that I'm going to look through and see if any of it applies before I throw it out, recycle it. But these are all the criteria that we've been using for a while now.
Are these ours, or do these come from the Secretary of Interior standards?
It's a combination of both. The replacement criteria are ours.
Okay.
There was a Windows committee that that figured out all of these tolerances for replacement parts and what would be good enough and give property owners wiggle room without being so restrictive that you'd have to build replicas, which I think was the intent. But a lot of the language is kind of standard from the Secretary of the Interior.
Why are you asking, Chip? I'm curious. It's a good question, but where?
Windows are a little bit of my bugaboo. It's
Oh, okay.
like, I mean, there are real issues that, and I'll use my own experience is, we hired somebody to redo all our wood windows and it didn't do anything to make any, didn't insulate it better. There's still a lot of airflow,
Did they weather strip them also? Yeah. they're just
all of it.
didn't-
And it's.
Tell me after the meeting off camera who you hired, please.
Okay. It made no difference at all. None. I still, and so you end up with, really ugly storm windows out there and, all sorts of condensation issues. And, I think that there is a real need to balance the energy efficiency to figure out how to do that, and I think, there are people that'll say, like, if I could replace my historic windows with an exact replica that's an energy efficient window, I would do that.
Yeah.
And I think we have to start thinking about, like, all of this language seems very daunting, that if I need to replace a window, I'm like, oh God, this is just gonna be a nightmare. And I feel like, this is why people are like, oh, I have to go before the Historic District Commission. And I wonder if we can change kind of the way it sounds and the way it comes across to have maybe a little bit of preamble in the section. Like, we need to balance the character defining elements of these windows somehow with the ability for homeowners to make their houses more energy efficient. I don't know how to wordsmith that well, and I realize that lots of my colleagues in the preservation field think I'm a blasphemer for my position on this. And I don't want to open the door to stick on, divided lights and that kind of stuff. But I do think that there needs to be a little bit of flexibility in here. Because under this, and again, going back to a house like mine, like, I can't replace those windows. They're not rotten.
Right.
Like, I have to, and I can tell you it wasn't cheap doing these 11 windows.
Yeah.
But, I think people get really upset with things. Like, if they go through that process, it's not better, then they're like, well, what do I do now?
Yeah, it's a tricky one.
And I think that's a much broader discussion.
Yeah.
But
And-
yes,
but that's-
point
yeah.
taken that we can do things in here now.
Right.
That-
And some of that
and-
goes to the next section, on the siding, is like, we very explicitly say, like, we don't want vinyl and aluminum siding, which I think is great, and you stick with that. And, obviously in the downtown, we're not gonna we shouldn't be allowing, exterior EFS stuff. But, like, we have to think about newer material that looks like the old material, like whether it's hardy board or whether it's something else. Like, I think that's just the reality of some situations, that we need to update this to reflect changing
Yeah.
technology.
And the commission has changed course on a lot of things. I mean, it's from tiny tweaks to larger issues. Like, when I started here, there wasn't hardy siding.
Right.
And then for the first 10 years, it was like, oh man, is this stuff going to last or is it going to look terrible in 10 years? And it's held up and it's been okay. And so it's kind of vetted now. And the same with the plasticky wood.
Tracks.
No, that you can use for trim, that you
Oh,
can
yeah.
saw and
Exact.
paint.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's not the word I was thinking of, but, yeah, it's a brand name.
Yeah.
But those are things that, can work great for certain areas where you have water issues and other issues, and it'll last a lot longer. And, yes, boral, thank you. And also, the commission has changed course on windows on the back of the house, and windows that have previously been replaced with wood windows, but new wood windows last you 20 years. So you guys have decided that it's okay to have clad windows on the back or on inconspicuous parts of the house if replacement wood windows have already bit the dust, which is a real concern.
Yeah.
Wish somebody would come out with a good boral window, that we know won't warp and will last. And I think it's coming, but
I do too. I think,
don't know if it's here yet.
yeah, I think the 3D printing stuff and building materials are going to converge, and there's going to be a lot of really exciting things that we can do and not have them look so blatantly not original, like aluminum vinyl. That was an easy decision to just outlaw because they don't effectively replace anything. But yeah, no, I think the material science is getting way better.
And fiberglass porch posts too.
I was going to
Yeah.
bring up
If
porch
you've got a
posts,
pretty
yeah.
standard
Yeah.
porch post, it's pretty easy to get a replica that's not wood, but it will last for a lot longer.
This is just kind of a funny aside that's maybe worth saying at this point. I have, you know the Tylers. They have that wonderful house around the corner from here with the giant columns, and it's beautiful, and they're both preservation architects, and they're the true believers, and they spared no expense restoring their house the perfect way, and when the bottom of their columns rotted, they rebuilt them in exactly the same fashion with, the same type of material, and then they did it again 3 years later because the wood, you can't get the same, it's not the same wood.
Yep.
And I had this conversation like, so, how do you feel about that? And he's like, I really wish there was some other, I would love to do this again, but with, another material. And they're different in that they could, they are as fervent as anyone's ever going to get about this stuff. And they can afford the labor to do that over and over again where most people can't. But I think we could get a lot more decaying historic architecture in Ann Arbor to be replaced tastefully if we embraced some of those things, as best we could, because there's a lot of it, like you said, it's rotting, it's disintegrating, and people are afraid to touch it because they just don't know what the answer would be if they did or if they're even allowed to. And so I think a lot of it just keeps getting kicked down the road. And there's a lot of slow motion destruction going on.
Yeah. And I also agree with Chip that there are a lot of bullets here for windows.
Yeah.
I don't think it's
That's why
necessary to have that many.
I
would
summarized,
hope that
I
we
tried
could
to
get our
summarize
point
my
across.
comments into
Yeah.
what I said rather than going through each of the
Yeah.
bullets.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, that would be nice to trim up this section a bit. And maybe there's an appendix with all this, kind of the added detail. Don't get rid of it, but just, it doesn't have to all be in the appropriate, not appropriate.
Yeah.
Part.
It doesn't have to be, though.
I don't know.
Okay, wood siding trim and architectural details.
Yeah.
Mariana added a note that the Historic District Commission does not regulate paint color. Currently painted wood siding may be repainted in any color. We get that question a lot. So that's smart.
Can I just make a comment about
Yep.
some of these graphics?
Yeah.
I feel like I'm looking at a 1980s how to do architectural drawing manual, but that paint graphic,
Yeah, that's pretty bad. Kind of impressive that they can show that in a drawing. Like whoever sketched that,
Yeah.
good
it seriously
job.
took me a long time to figure out what that was.
Yeah. It's a paintbrush magically painting itself. On some really smushed up cedar siding or something, with like a 1.5 inch exposure or something. Like, I don't.
Yeah, there's been talk of getting outside help to reformat this whole document once we're done with it, which would be tremendous because it's just such a behemoth to work with right now.
Yes.
And a lot of these are the diagrams are just confusing and maybe don't quite make sense. So I think there is definitely an overhaul of the imagery to be done.
Yeah, you see a mishmash of many different consultants from the last 30 years who've been hired for little illustrations of things, and they're sort of all dumped in here. Okay. So Mariana wants us to think about the language here for synthetic replacement siding. Yeah, I agree that it reads like the HDC is okay with replacing wood siding with synthetic rather than matching wood siding if it cannot be repaired, which really isn't the intent. The intent is if the HDC is going to approve synthetic replacement siding, there are a very limited number of conditions that must exist for that to happen.
What if we move the only? The HDC will only consider the installation of synthetic replacement then. I think that would make it sound more restrictive. Is that what you're looking for?
Where are you?
Second paragraph.
Oh, second paragraph. Only be considered when retention and repair.
Will be-
Oh, no, I'm talking about the last sentence of the first paragraph.
Okay. In the following.
Oh, yeah, I see what you mean. So we'll only in the following specific instances.
I had a question on one of the appropriate ones, the one that says exposure, so matching the replacement siding to the existing siding as closely as possible. Exposure to the weather should be within 1 inch of the existing siding and in any case be no more than 5 inches. Why can't it be more than 5 inches?
I don't know. I just don't know.
So we should remove that part, right? Or just,
So.
because what if
this
you're
is-
matching it and it's a 6-inch, I mean, typically they're not, the historic
Yeah, yeah,
is always less than 5 inches, but what if it's not?
yeah. Yeah. It should just be within 1 inch of the existing siding.
That's what I thought.
Exposure to the weather. Yeah, appropriate is replicating special details such as beaded edge, drop lap, profile, or fish scales. How do you replicate those in vinyl or aluminum? You can't.
can't.
You can't.
No.
Or I think that this should say, not obscuring. Oops. Sorry, that didn't work. Not obscuring special details.
But is this in the case if you have special details that have been deteriorated and they want new siding there? Would we rather that they replicate the special details in the wood that they're replacing their deteriorated wood with?
Oh, I thought they were replicating it in synthetic materials.
Well, isn't our position that if you have wood siding and it's deteriorated and you need to replace it, that you replace it with wood?
Yeah.
Oh, I thought this section was about replacing it with like cementitious board.
That's where my comment, it's confusing,
Yeah.
because our stance is, if I'm correct, if you have wood, you replace it with wood. Some instances, you might need synthetic, but I think this section in general makes it seem like we want you to use synthetic more than we actually do. So maybe it's a bigger discussion
This is a
of
bigger discussion
rearranging,
maybe, right?
but I think the way that it's framed makes it seem like, fine, yeah, use synthetic siding.
Yeah. And this is only talking about vinyl and aluminum, it's not even talking about cementitious
Yeah.
siding.
Oh,
Which looks
really?
a lot better.
Okay, I was
Yeah.
I was
Yeah, so
confused by that.
I think
mean-
this whole page needs to be updated.
Yeah, I think you could probably just say like vinyl and aluminum,
No.
no. Next page.
Right, but also there's other synthetic
Yeah,
materials that we would accept.
right.
And I don't know if an owner said, I have a whole section of cedar that's coming off because it's deteriorated. Or, I took off my aluminum siding, there's a million nail holes in the cedar. I wish I could have used it, but I can't. That's coming off. If they say they want to put, cementitious board that matches within 1 inch and all the specs, is that not appropriate?
I've approved that, staff approved that.
Right,
Yeah.
okay. So
If the
then
wood
that
can't
should
be
be in the
saved.
standards, so
Yeah,
that
yeah.
people know that that is okay to do.
Yep, yep.
Because it's,
Yeah.
Would it make sense to have less sentences and more bullets here?
Probably. I think the sentences here are confusing, and so I think it needs to be clear when synthetic would be appropriate and when it wouldn't be. And so this, I think, might need some more serious rearranging
Yeah.
to make that clear.
it's a little confusing because it's kind of up to the homeowner. Okay, I'm replacing cedar. I can now choose, I could replace it with cedar or I could replace it with synthetic. If you go the synthetic route, then there's appropriate and there's not appropriate, but the owner made a decision first, and maybe either are appropriate. There's a bit of a
Yeah.
owner decision to make,
Yep,
which is confusing things.
yep.
Okay.
Would it be worth entertaining where the siding is on a house? And the reason I ask this, we discuss a lot of these things from the perspective of a homeowner, which is a much lower intensity of use. I come from a context of student housing, commercially run, historic properties, where just for liability and safety purposes, you're salting more, you're protecting walkways more, and the siding that comes close to those walkways or paths is just getting subjected to a lot more wear and tear. It seems like if there was a way for us to be more permissive for an alternate material on the siding of a house, when it gets close to where there might be backsplash of salty water or whatnot, that would make sense to me. That's a place where the same problem that Norm is having with the bottom of his columns, it happens.
Yeah,
Anywhere near a
I think we
walkway.
generally allow synthetic material
okay.
there. I mean, like the sills of windows, the people are requesting boral and, I think that that's being approved,
Okay.
yeah. And then, are you staff approving stuff like that?
Sometimes, not very often, but sometimes, yeah. If they can prove that there's a problem.
Yeah. Okay, so are we just
All right.
done with this section because it needs
It needs
a
work.
little bit of a
Yep.
revamp, okay?
All right, moving on to masonry.
Is that crossed out? I can't tell. The painting previously unpainted masonry, is that typed in and then crossed out?
That's what it looks like.
Oh, yeah, it's because right above it, it says applying paint to previously unpainted surfaces. So that it is
Well,
still,
we're
it is
driving the
still
point home.
not appropriate to paint unpainted masonry, but we only have to say it once.
Chip, what do you think about the sandblasting diagram there? At least there's a hand holding the hose, right? It's
not a magic
I think
paintbrush.
that might be the least appropriate graphic I've ever seen in a public document.
Okay, okay. I don't know, all right. Moving on then.
Let's move on. We gotta go. Okay, roof shapes. We talk about different kinds of roofs.
Yep. All very interesting.
Design guidelines for roofs. I agree
I didn't have
that
anything here.
removing dormers is not appropriate. That's good.
Mm-hmm.
Do we need anything to address the Craftsman shed roof, full width, attic windows? The shed roof dormers that get blown out when additions are put on? Or do you think that we've got that under control using our existing guidelines?
I mean, they've been approved as far as I can tell more, right? I mean,
Well,
or
yeah,
are you
yeah.
intervening? Do
No,
you do a
I'm
lot
just
of work
asking.
on those, or
I'm
do the
just asking.
standards do the work for you on those?
Well, they,
Because those seem very tricky, obviously.
tricky.
You're saying
They
if
are
there's
tricky.
there's a rear dormer, like
Yeah.
a rear shed dormer, and you're
Yeah.
trying to do it, that's like one of the hardest additions.
Yeah.
I don't know how to,
yeah.
I don't know how to write a standard that is gonna explain how to do one of those.
What if we said, removing all or part of historic dormers? Or removing all evidence of historic dormers when additions are attached, or something along those lines? Or do we not care if they face the back? I care.
I don't know if
That's why
that's
I'm
a
bringing it
not
up.
care, but that's one of the places where, again, the last couple times we've been on a tour and there's been a shed dorm or something that was messed with, I don't know what else they would do. Like, that's the one place they can go with their house.
Mm-hmm.
We're shrinking it from the sides and from the top. And then the natural extension of that roof line, that, you can't get any space on that house if you don't do something there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If the shed dormer goes all the way across the house, then you're lucky, but yeah, if you have the case where it doesn't go all the way across the house, it makes it very difficult, and I think that that's where the commission just has to
Yeah.
vote and discuss and stuff, right? I don't think there's a standard that can say, do
Okay.
this, don't do that,
All right.
'cause I can't think of one at
All right.
30 at night on a
Yeah,
Tuesday.
I know it. Okay, barrier-free,
Yeah.
let's see.
These seemed good. I mean, it's just like, make it removable, don't put it somewhere that's really horrible. But this is the kind of thing where it's kind of like the project we had today, where it almost always seems like there's only one place we can put this thing, you know? It's good that we have the standards, but I'm glad there are not a lot of them, because it just seems like these kind of come to us
Yep.
in a way where
Yeah.
it's like, not a lot of options.
Do you think the design guidelines should have language about how if you're building a new deck on the back, it's okay to not have a railing that looks like it's on the front porch of a historic house? Because we always allow that, wire guardrails, or we had a clear acrylic guardrail once, or,
Do we have a section on decks or accessory structures?
we have one on
Maybe-
accessory structures. We'll get to that someday.
Yeah.
There's decks and porches in
Okay.
residential.
Okay, I'm
Yeah.
jumping the gun.
Yeah, no, but I think in general, there could be some explanation further up in the document where it says like, it sort of explains, if someone's never, designed something like this
Yeah.
before, the going in assumption is always, oh, this thing needs to look historic and
Right,
match the existing house
right.
completely. And it's very counterintuitive
Right.
to learn about
Right.
the standards and realize, oh, no, you actually want to differentiate and all those things. So, I mean, that would be a paragraph for, kind of people coming in fresh with an assumption. This can, it doesn't have to, it shouldn't, in fact, match.
Should not look old. All right. Site features, driveways, curb cuts, parking, walkways, paved areas. I've not had any problems using these.
Yeah.
I think they've been okay.
Yeah, I mean, this is another place where you just have to be very vague, because this could be anything, like
Every driveway's
sidewalks
different.
and driveway. I mean, it's,
Yeah.
we don't get a lot of like lighting, like replica historic.
I don't think
lights,
I've ever gotten a
Yeah.
lighting request. In fact, it might be good to, I'm going to make a note to look at this section because there might be more here than we need. There's,
I just sent this to someone today. the
Oh,
lighting
good.
Section.
you did?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think that people aren't really paying attention to this either. I mean, you can do lighting, you can put in lighting without necessarily bothering us, and so you do see a lot of like like, it just seems like this is one where it's different than the others where it's just a homeowner can do that, it's a little more easy to put in lighting, so.
It's also very often a part of a house that doesn't stay continuous like the other features of a house.
Right.
Yeah.
Where
It's
it doesn't-
very
it doesn't
replaceable.
track as
Yeah.
consistently with other.
Yeah, this is really specific, this is for like, if you have a historic exterior light, we're
Right.
trying to preserve that.
Yeah,
And if
right.
you want to mess with that, then we need to know. But, yeah, this isn't about any other kind of lighting, which is
It's been-
almost all of the lighting.
Right, that's been changed.
I,
over
don't-
20
I don't
years.
know, if there's, I'm sure you must know, Jill, like, there's some historic light fixture out there that, there's like one or something.
Well,
and
there's the State
this-
Theater.
Right, the State
Yeah.
Theater marquee.
I mean,
That's
I
what
feel
this is
like
for.
it's just commercial buildings. I feel like almost
Yeah.
that should go into the commercial chapter.
Well, there are a few houses,
Maybe fraternity sorority houses or something that have
or
a
I'm
light.
thinking of like the Inglis house
Yeah.
has historic light fixtures on posts, and that's not in a historic district, but
Yeah.
I'd hate to miss
Yeah.
a house that has them by
It's very few.
taking them out. It's
probably,
very
right?
few, yeah, which is why it's
Can,
not very heavily trafficked.
so on the solar panels,
Mm-hmm.
can we replace that first paragraph?
I
with-
second that.
With something.
I was like, we could do
about
better here, yeah.
A20 and,
Yeah,
our
Yeah.
carbon neutrality
Yeah.
goals.
Yeah, I thought the same thing, Chip. I was like, we can, yes, we've come a long way since 2007. Let's brag a little bit.
hey, that was brand new when this was written
Right?
in
I know.
2009.
That's amazing. Yes, hopefully when
Good.
this gets rewritten again, that paragraph will be able to,
Yeah.
to be rewritten again.
When we first added solar to the design guidelines, there was a lot of talk about how tall they should be off the roof surface and how they should be attached, and there's a lot of worry and concern about all of this. And we kind of don't even look at that anymore. We just say, oh,
Yeah.
It's
How much of the roof do they
standardized now.
cover?
Yeah,
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 yeah.
it's not.
Yeah,
Well, and
so-
I think there's going to be constantly evolving technology, right?
Yeah.
Why even try to get in front of that?
yeah. All right. So now we have, Mariana, you really bumped this one up.
Well, that's because we have
Oh, because it's,
we have a separate handout with more updated solar. So I just took from the most recent to put in here.
okay. So these are the design guidelines that a previous commission approved, but were never added to the official document
Right.
because this is the first time we've updated it.
Yeah.
I thought you were really going to town on solar for a minute. I'm like, wow, she's really into solar.
I mean, these are all good. These were just taken from that other document.
Yeah,
Yes.
that
Yeah.
Secretary of Interior's, yeah. Okay.
So, and maybe we can go through that. Maybe some of them are even a little bit outdated.
like what?
So, well, I don't know. I'm just
Okay,
saying,
you're gonna
I
go
didn't,
through it.
I
Okay.
didn't read them. I just took them from our guidelines. So it's probably useful for us to make sure that maybe we can simplify some of them. Maybe, who knows?
Yeah,
Like we can probably
Like-
delete the 8 inches of roof surface kind of thing.
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And And we talk about solar shingles, which never really went anywhere, and so maybe we just call those new approaches as a catch-all or something. All right. Hey, that's it.
Yeah, that's
66 pages. Great. All right. Thank you all very much.
Yeah, that was a good discussion.
Yeah, that was good.
Do we want to see this again next month?
For the benefit of the other commissioners, or to see what we've changed?
For the benefit of the other commissioners.
I think they have to read it on their own.
Okay, fair enough.
If they have any good comments, though, we should hear from them.
Yeah, Kathy did send comments.
Yeah.
And we'll make sure that those get in here.
Okay, so are we done with that? We're done with new business. And that gets us to H, approval of the minutes. And we have the minutes in our packet from December, wait a second. Yeah, from December 12th, I believe, was the meeting date. Any comments or corrections there? No?
Nope.
Okay. Hearing and seeing no objection, the meeting's minutes are approved as presented. Oh, thank you to Brittany Alexander from the city for providing the minutes and also the agenda this evening. Okay, that brings us to I, reports from commissioners. Does any commissioner have a report this evening? No? Okay. And then that brings us to assignments. So we're looking for volunteers. It's going to be a review committee Monday, February 10th at noon. And that meeting is on Thursday, February 13th.
Okay.
I think I'm out of town.
For the meeting?
Yeah, both.
I am also out of town for the meeting.
Okay.
What's the date of the meeting? 14th?
13th.
Ben, you out of town?
I am also out of town.
You're out
for
of
that
town
meeting.
for the meeting.
Okay. Steve,
That
are
is
you-
the first day of, or the night that the midwinter, public schools midwinter break
Kids go on
starts.
break.
Okay. Okay, so we will not have a quorum, so we either won't have a meeting or we,
Just do design guidelines.
well, it would depend on if the other three are gonna be able to make it or not.
3.
We already have 3 applications for next month.
They make their addition.
Their additions. Could we do,
I can meet earlier in that week.
could you do it on Wednesday?
I think so.
I'm gonna have to check with my wife.
Okay, okay.
I don't know when I'm
Yeah, see if you're
spoken
around that
for.
week. Yeah,
I could.
okay, okay.
Yeah, I can do it.
Ben, could you do Wednesday, the 12th?
Yeah, I can do that.
Okay,
Yes, I can do Wednesday the 12th.
okay, Steve will check, and I will check with the others. Normally, I'm okay with just moving on to the next meeting, but since we've got 3 now,
Yeah,
it doesn't bode well.
make for a busy March.
Yeah, yeah. Okay.
So you'll let us know what
So, yeah, so I'll let you know, and then we'll do a call for volunteers if we get a new meeting date for the
Is it?
review committee.
sounds good.
Is it ever done that a commissioner zooms in?
Can't.
Can't
It's
do
not
that,
allowed.
okay.
No, already checked that.
Used to.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, reports from staff, Kay. Any?
None for me.
No, Mariana? No. Thank you both. Now we're on to concerns of commissioners. Are there any concerns the commissioners would like to express?
I expressed all of my
Yeah, it's already been expressed. Anything down here? Okay. Any communications this month?
There are not.
No. Okay, in that case, I now adjourn the January 9th, 2025 HDC meeting at 8:41 PM. Thank you all.